Okay, so it's 1:15. I think we probably should get started here. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to our session on thinking historically for Canada's future research partnership. I know that we have people here from across the country, but I want to just acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from Treaty 6 territory, the ancestral and traditional territory of many Indigenous people. We are grateful for the traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those that have gone before us. Our two speakers today are well known in the world of social studies in Canada. I think many of you probably know them. Carla Peck is Professor of Social Studies Education and the Faculty of Education at the University of Alberta, and is the director of our topic today, Thinking Historically for Canada's Future, a national research partnership focused on K-12 history education. Alan Sears is also well known. He is Professor Emeritus in the Faculty of Education at the University of New Brunswick. Welcome all. You can start now.
Great. Thanks so much, John, and welcome to everybody. It's incredible to see 96 people, 97 now, especially I know it's late in the day for many of you. It's sort of lunchtime here in Alberta. So thanks for joining us. Okay, right away to share the screen. And then I do this and swap displays. There's lots of buttons to click. So now you should see it okay, I think. Looking good, Alan? Okay, all right. So yes, so hi everybody, I'm Carla Peck. As John said, I'm Director of Thinking Historically for Canada's Future, which is a pan-Canadian research partnership focused on studying K-12 history education. And I'm going to get into a little more detail in a moment about that. But just to tell you a little bit about who's involved in the partnership, especially this is a bit of a recap for folks who maybe are new to the learning about thinking historically for Canada's future. It started out as a 7-year project, and because of the pandemic, our funding agency, SSHRC, or Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, gave us an extra year. So now it's actually an 8-year partnership.
Hi, Carla. So sorry to interrupt you. Can you hit swap displays? We can still see your presenter view.
Oh, thank you. Is that better?
That's perfect.
Oh,
sorry for interrupting.
goodness.
Thank you so much.
No, that's fine. I thought I had done it right, but always still can't figure out this Zoom thing 18 months in. I'm sure others can relate. So we have 28 co-investigators from 22 universities across the country. We have 16 collaborators who are either from universities or other educational institutions like departments of education. And then we have 32 partner organizations who are mostly from social studies teachers organizations from across the country. And we also have a fair number of history and heritage organizations. And I just wanted to give you a little snapshot. You might see your organization in this chart. Just gives you a sense of who our partner organizations are and the range of folks that we have involved in the partnership. We're so grateful to have a partnership with all of these members, and we have continued to add partners as we have found a need, perhaps in a part of the country or in a sort of educational jurisdiction where we didn't have representation. So, you know, we've continued to add partners along the way, and that's probably might continue into the future as well. Again, based on what our needs are and how the project expands. Thinking Historically for Canada's Future is organized into 2 phases. Phase 1 is focused on mapping the terrain of history education. So basically trying to find out what's happening currently in K-12 history education across the country. This is the first national research study focused on K-12 history education in more than 50 years. And lots has changed in 50 years, at least in terms of our society, how we think about multiculturalism and diversity and the rights of Indigenous peoples. And we could think of lots of other examples of how our society has changed. What we don't really know is how much our teaching and learning of history has changed in the classroom. Not in any kind of scientific way. We certainly have lots of anecdotal information. So this is an attempt to really find out what's happening across the country in terms of K-12 history education. Phase 2 is focused on knowledge creation and innovation, and I'll say a little bit more about that later. You can see on the screen that we have, there are 3 columns and then 3 arrows. Our research in both phase 1 and phase 2 is organized into 3 research clusters: curriculum and resources, pedagogy, and then teacher education. And pedagogy also includes both teaching and learning. And our 3 threads are that we are examining in each of these clusters are historical thinking, Indigenous knowledges, and civic engagement. And so the idea is that when we're examining curriculum and resources, we're examining them for evidence of how they take up the ideas of historical thinking, how they integrate Indigenous knowledges into curricula and resources, and how resources and curricula actually make connections between history and civic engagement, because the rationale for history education, since history education became an official subject in school, was teach more history, get better citizens. We don't actually have any evidence to support that that's the case. And so we want to know in what ways are, in all of these areas, curriculum and resources, teaching and learning, and teacher education, are connections being made between historical thinking, Indigenous knowledges, and civic engagement, and to what extent these are actually present in each of those 3 research themes or clusters. So here's where we are right now in phase 1. And there's even, despite the pandemic and our inability to conduct research in schools, because let's face it, teachers and students and families have already had enough on their plate over the last 18 months. They didn't need researchers coming in and saying, hey, can you give us one more thing? Despite not being able to do that, we have really accomplished quite a bit over the first couple of years of the grant. We have reviewed hundreds of research articles and chapters and books related to the 3 topic areas to get a better sense of where the whole entire field is of history education across each of these research themes or clusters. The curriculum and resource cluster is right now developing frameworks for analysis focused on historical thinking, historically minded civic engagement, and Indigenous knowledges. They've taken the lead on that work. These frameworks will also be taken up and inform the work that's happening in the pedagogy or teaching and learning cluster and the teacher education cluster. And cluster 1, the curriculum and resources, is also beginning the process of collecting provincial and territorial history and social studies curriculum and textbooks. And once these frameworks are sorted out, we'll begin the process of testing them out on a few curricula and textbooks to refine them, and then doing a deep dive into curricula and textbooks to really get a sense of what these things, how these ideas show up in curriculum and textbooks. The teaching and learning cluster has been focused a lot on developing the teacher and student surveys that I'll say a bit more about later. Again, these are national level surveys that will go out to teachers and students. And we haven't had a national level study of this kind, these kinds of surveys, again, in more than 50 years. So we're really excited about what we're going to learn. We're also working on developing a plan for portraits of professional practice. And as everybody knows, a survey will take you sort of an inch deep, but don't tell you sort of the contextual factors that are happening on the ground in classrooms. And so we also want to do a deep dive in that way by doing some case studies across the country to better understand what it means to teach history, whether you're a elementary generalist teacher or a specialist with a master's degree in history, or maybe you're somebody teaching outside of your field. For what you got your Bachelor of Education in, but you've been asked to teach social studies or history. We want to know about those experiences too. In the teacher education research cluster, in addition to the literature reviews, which all of the groups are doing, they've conducted an analysis of Bachelor of Education programs and requirements in terms of social studies and history pedagogy courses. Alan's going to be speaking to that, so I won't say any more about that. The plan there as well is to conduct interviews with key informants in Bachelor of Education programs, teacher education programs, again, to better understand the context and do a bit of a deeper dive. And also in the works, we'll be looking at what kind of professional learning opportunities, like this very conference, are available to teachers who are looking to develop their skills and knowledge and pedagogical expertise when it comes to teaching history. So those things are all currently in the works right now. You can see why we need a big team. In phase 2, which is the knowledge creation and innovation phase, this is the opportunity for us to look at what we have found through our research in phase 1 and determine areas that we want to investigate further, that where questions come up about why did this happen or what do you think is going on here. So phase 2 will allow us to do some more sort of exploratory studies of those kind. We'll also be able to, in phase 2, take suggestions from our partner organizations, from teachers we meet in the field, from our history and heritage organization partners who are interested in learning more about particular innovations. Perhaps it's using video games to teach history, or working closely with an elder to teach history, doing land-based pedagogy. There's a million possibilities, and those possibilities are really exciting as well. And we haven't, planned those out in depth yet because we still need to find out where we're at right now. That's sort of mapping the terrain stage of the research, but we're already, excited and thinking about what the possibilities could be for phase 2. Throughout all of these, we are always thinking about historical thinking, Indigenous knowledges, and civic engagement, both in phase 1 and phase 2. Now, how can you get involved in phase 1? Our teacher survey, after more than a year of development and field testing and feedback from partners and teachers and all kinds of folks, is going to be ready to launch this November. So we will be asking our partner organizations to distribute it to their members. It will be available on the Thinking Historically for Canada's Future website. And I just ask that you keep your eyes out for it and fill it out. Also encourage your colleagues to do the survey too. I will say it is an extensive survey. And so it will require between 20 and 30 minutes to fill out. But because this is, repeating myself again, the first of its kind in more than 50 years, it's really crucial for us to get as much participation as possible so we can try to paint an accurate picture about what's happening across the country. And the survey is for anybody who is teaching K-12, who teaches history as some part of their teaching assignment, including elementary teachers who have history pieces within the social studies curriculum. The other ways to get involved when we're getting ready and looking for volunteers for our case studies for the Portraits of Professional Practice, we'll be looking for people to put their hands up and volunteer. You could always assist your association with consulting and providing feedback on our various activities. For example, we've sent the surveys out for feedback from numerous people. Phase 2 projects, as I said, will focus on innovations. And so there's lots of potential. Perhaps you have something you'd like to know more about. There may be a way that we could build a research project around that. And we would ask that you would, of course, spread the word about thinking historically for Canada's future. I put the website in the chat at the beginning of the presentation. And why you should get involved. I won't repeat the first point there because I've already said it a few times, but this is a great potential for you to be involved in influencing the shape of future curriculum, resources, pedagogy, and teacher education, because we will be learning from teachers in the field, on the ground, about what are the kinds of things that you need, what's working, what's not working. And for our partners, the data we collect will enable you to advocate, to create materials, to learn how to better meet the needs of teachers that you might be serving through professional development opportunities that you offer, and so on. So for all you Hamilton fans out there, don't miss your shot. This is the chance to really get involved in a once-in-a-lifetime national research project focused on history education. And there's just screenshots of our website. Again, the website link is in the chat, and that's where I will end. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to take over from Carla. I'm just going to share my screen now and put it in. There we go. Welcome. Glad you're here. And I'm excited to talk about the teacher education portion of that column that Carla showed you, that cluster of the research and where we are at this point in phase 1. Get rethinking the devil's bargain, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And I want to say that this was put together with my colleague, James Urinsky, who's a PhD student working with me, and he's helped me with the data for this. I want to tell you, in the teacher education cluster, we've been proceeding through 3 phases. One is a scan of teacher education programs in Canada, and we've conducted that so far with publicly available information from websites from teacher education programs. I'm going to talk to you about data from 70 programs across 45 institutions today. And that focus today is on institutions, Anglophone institutions. We also have data on Francophone. Everything in the project is being done in French and English. We're also doing a scan of teacher certification and professional standards related to history teaching in history education. And finally, we're going to use both of these scans to decide on case studies. Carla talked about the deep dive into to get at more depth in this. And so we're going to pick teacher education programs and we're looking from the data. So I'm going to talk to you today about 3 predominant types or 4 predominant types of teacher education programs. So we'll be interested to see that our case studies look at various types, that we are also regionally and linguistically representative. And many teacher education programs focus on Indigenous teacher education, and we're going to include some of those as well. So those are the phases of the teacher education portion of our research. Here you have a slide that shows some of the data, again, from 45 institutions and 70 programs. Many institutions have more than one initial teacher education program. But there are here 3 main models. One is a 4-year straight from high school model, which is particularly used in Alberta and Quebec, but shows up in other places as well. There are concurrent programs, and in a 4-year model, students earn 1 degree, usually a Bachelor of Education degree. There are what are called concurrent programs, 5- and 6-year concurrent programs, and that's where students from high school are working on 2 degrees at the same time. So in the case of history teachers, they're working on a Bachelor of Arts normally and a Bachelor of Education and taking some combination of arts and education courses every year during this 5- or 6-year span. There are also consecutive programs, and those are programs that students enter after completing a first degree. Many students enter these programs having a master's degree as well, but For the most part, they have a bachelor's degree. Again, for history teachers, usually a Bachelor of Arts degree. And there are programs running from 10 months. I teach in a 10-month post-degree BEd program at University of New Brunswick. And Ontario recently moved, or relatively recently moved, from a 1-year post-degree program to a 2-year post-degree program. That universities are a consecutive program. If you take a look at how many of these they are, the predominant models are consecutive programs. So just slightly over 60% of the programs we've looked at in English Canada are consecutive programs. One of the things we need to take a look at are the numbers of students doing these programs to see how that impacts how many students, how many graduates are coming from these. But I suspect the numbers will come out even higher in favor of consecutive programs. The concurrent programs would be the next space on it, representing 28 or 29%. And then the 4-year programs are the smallest component. This data raises some questions. What explains the range of program types? What do we know of anything about the relative effectiveness of program types for preparing history teachers? As far as I know, and I've been at this game for a long time, we really know nothing about which of these programs works for what, in which ways, and those kinds of things. We're hoping that we might be able to find some of those things out in the course of our research. Given the trend in education generally to stress the connection between disciplinary and pedagogical knowledge and skills, some people call this pedagogical content knowledge, and specific connections between disciplinary knowledge in history and history teaching, disciplinary knowledge we often refer to as historical thinking, which program types offer the greatest potential for preparing history teachers? Is it time to rethink the connections between disciplinary and professional preparation in teachers and teacher education? And here's where I'm going to try to be a little bit provocative. At my university, this sign is on the side of the education building. Great educators start here. And it is profoundly untrue. It's profoundly untrue for 2 reasons. First of all, people's personal backgrounds and all of their experiences matter in terms of who they're going to be as an educator. And as I said, I'm in a consecutive program. Canada has moved to a model where whichever program you have, we believe that there are 2 major components in a teacher's education at university. One is a disciplinary component, or an academic, if you like, component, and the other is a professional component. And so before students get to us, they've completed that disciplinary component. They have their degree. And so that's a part of their teacher education, but it's often disconnected from the professional education they experience in our building. So I would argue that great educators, if they're going to be great, have started long before they get to us. One of the things that I've said in my own work is that history at teacher education is not solely about learning new concepts and skills. It's about becoming a particular kind of educator. And that's one who is a practitioner in the field and who understands both the discipline of history and the pedagogy of history teaching. And to be honest, it seems to be a bit of madness, if that's what you intend in the end, to split these 2 parts of education into the way that we do. And I might point out that once students reach that wall, they almost never go back to disciplinary study, even after they're finished their degree, as they're doing ongoing teacher education. Louis Menand, in his book he wrote a number of years ago called The Marketplace Ideas, which is really a history of American higher education, documents some of the split. It was a man by the name of Charles William Eliot, who was president of Harvard for 40 years between 1869 and 1909, that shepherded the professional education into universities, and he set up a firewall between the professions and what was called liberal education, or what I'm calling disciplinary or academic education. Menand suggests this was a devil's bargain, and I think he's right. Here's a quote from him about this being nonsense, this kind of separation. The president seemed to think that somehow the professional education would contaminate the disciplines or vice versa. We need both as part of teacher education, in my view. And while I'm talking today about the consecutive model, I suspect even most concurrent models in Canada are actually quite separate. Students are studying history and history education at the same time, but they're in separate courses, which I think are distinct. And that's not true everywhere in the world. So I just want to, that's a question that we have to investigate. I think that it's time to ask questions about our basic models of teacher education. And I would submit that we know almost nothing about the effectiveness of different models. And it's time we did, because in case you hadn't noticed, teaching and teacher education are often under attack from particular political orientations. And we have no basis right now for making an argument in favor of one kind of teacher education over another. And I think I'll leave it there and let you ask questions. Thank you.
Okay, if anybody's got any questions to ask at this point. I did see some comment in the chat, but I don't think it was really a question here, so. One thing that I would emphasize to everybody that is watching right now is the most important thing you can do in the short term is participate in this survey that will be out next month. It is critical that we all get on board on this because, you know, this is important research that needs to be done, and the survey is the first step. So take the 20-30 minutes required and make sure you get it done.
Get your favorite beverage nearby and have it nearby and just, yeah, go to town. I think someone has their hand up, John. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Paul Bennett. Allow Paul to talk. Hey, Paul. Oh, unmute. Sorry. I think.
Okay. I think, can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for your presentation. I quite enjoyed it. Alan, I wanted to ask you a question about teacher education programs. Having worked in Quebec and know all about the McGill program, so it's essentially concurrent, and then having experience in the two other provinces I've worked in, I formed some impressions of them, but I'm not sure that they're valid. Don't want to share them with you. I want to ask a specific question about the concurrent programs and the how many in the concurrent programs have master's degrees and are, or is it a deterrent to pursuing a master's degree? That was that we had many discussions with McGill. A lot of the principals, we met regularly with McGill, and they were saying, why aren't you hiring our teachers? And the response was, send us the odd MA.
Well, I actually don't know the answer to your question in terms of how many, but concurrent programs, consecutive programs are more designed for people with bachelor's or master's degrees. So in my program at UNB, a consecutive program, I would say somewhere between 15 and 20%, that's a rough guess, of people coming have a graduate degree in a subject area. But the concurrent programs are designed for people who have made the decision early to be a teacher. Right. And want to pursue the same at the same time. In Finland, they run a concurrent initial teacher education program that leads to a master's degree for high school students, for secondary students, in the subject matter that the teacher is expecting to teach. So that's a typical model in Finland. There are lots of people, including many Finns, who claim that's the best model of teacher education in the world. It's one that's very attractive to me, but part of the reason for doing our study is we don't know the answer to your question for Canada, and we need to know it.
Just to follow up on this particular question, the connection between concurrent programs and whether they're preparing students or teachers for elementary school versus high school, and high school hiring decisions, and whether I think it's worth studying just whether those from concurrent programs are mainly elementary teachers, and the secondary school teachers generally come from the consecutive programs. I'm just guessing out loud, but that's been my experience everywhere I've been.
I actually think you're probably wrong about that in terms of, I think many of the universities that offer concurrent programs are offering them to both, but I don't know in terms of hiring decisions. It's certainly been a model that university-based, when there were teachers colleges operating, university-based teacher education was seen as a route to secondary teaching, and teachers colleges were more likely to be a route to elementary or middle level teaching, for sure.
Is anyone in those faculties of education teaching powerful knowledge?
Well, I just did a session on it this week, but I'm going to just say, Paul, we have another hand up, so maybe we should allow another question.
Actually, I think Carla got to that question online here. So
Somebody else has a hand up though, John Ostapek. I'm just, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that based on what you've been talking about and all that, I do think that the one thing that's been good in the 21st century is the move away from a content-based approach to teaching history to one that involves historical thinking concepts. I took the honor specialist course in history. I was truly impressed. This was done by Robert Cote, and it was great to see that in the 21st century, what we want kids to do is develop themselves intellectually, to get them to think critically about history in terms of significance, in terms of looking at multiple lenses, perspective, cause and consequence. I think this is very, very much essential. And one of the things I think is, it is the world we live in. It's driven by modern science and technology. I get that. And I understand the whole thing around, being able to observe and quantify things and positivist philosophy. But I think kids do need to understand there is an interpretivist approach to understanding the world around them. There's many different ways to see things. And somehow I think in public education, someone mentioned the STEMs like science, technology, engineering, and math. I wonder if there maybe in our education system, there's an imbalance. What do you think?
Can you just say the last part of the question again, an imbalance?
Between this whole notion that everything has to be quantifiable and observable, that there's this, it's all based on everything's based on empiricism and a positivist approach to understanding the world, as opposed to an interpretivist approach.
Mm-hmm.
I just think maybe our education system is overly emphasizing, this whole thing around quality data management, and everything's driven by data.
Well, I certainly think that provinces and other jurisdictions, territories, where there are standardized provincial achievement tests at whatever grades, some go into the elementary grades, some have them as a graduation requirement, that shows the emphasis on those sort of quantifiable data that then get often misinterpreted by places like the Fraser Institute that then, sort of blame a school and says, well, and they get really misused. But the budget for the assessment branch in ministries of education is huge. And we know as educators how much assessment drives instruction and drives the kind of professional development opportunities that are offered and kind of resources even that you get. And in our case, in Alberta, the kind of curriculum that has been proposed. So yeah, I think that's a very important question for us to always keep in mind.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
okay, I hate to shut things down here, but we have gone over time here, and obviously this is an important topic that a lot of people care about, and I hope that you all continue to get engaged. Remember, this is a long-term project that Carla is leading us on, and she needs everybody to get involved as much as possible. So Thank you very much, Carla. Thank you, Alan. Your leadership is important to social studies in this country. So thank you, and thank you everybody for participating today. We're moving
And
on.
thank you, John, for chairing and moderating. It was
Okay.
great.
Thanks to John and to everyone. Thanks for the questions. I posted some information about powerful knowledge in the chat, including a link to a complete book from the University of London on it.
That is free to download.
Absolutely.
Right on. See y'all.
Thanks, everyone.